Hi everyone, I'm Jessica and I'm the creator of the Youniverse channel. And a couple weeks ago I came on to let you guys know that I had formed a partnership with Gaia.com. And I'm super excited about that partnership because it allows me to bring you content that I otherwise would not be able to present on this channel. So when Gaia came to me last week and asked me if I would present a Dr. Joe Dispenza interview that they conducted on my channel, naturally I was super excited about that because I'm such a Dr. Joe Dispenza fan. So in that interview, Dr. Dispenza talks about two of his books, which I actually happen to have, and one of those is You Are the Placebo, and the other one is Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself. Now, I've read good portions of these over quite some time. I have not finished these books. I'm going on vacation next week, so these are two of the three books that I'm taking with me because I enjoy this information so much. So with all of that said, I'm going to send you over to the video. It is a little over an hour long. If you like this video, this actually comes from Gaia.com, their streaming app, so there is a link in the description area. I encourage you to go over and check it out. So with that being said, I'm going to send you over to the Joe Dispenza interview, and I hope you enjoy. Have a great day. Talk to you guys soon.
Hello and welcome. I'm Lisa Garr. We are broadcasting from beautiful downtown Denver, Colorado, where Gaia TV is located. So, do you ever wonder what it means to break an old habit, or do you wonder why it's so hard to break? And do you want to learn how to be more positive and more resilient, but you just don't know how? What if you saw what it looks like physically in the brain for the brain to be stuck in a pattern, or even better, what it looks like when you break an old habit and you create a positive change? These images we're going to show you later made a huge impact on me, what it means to be literally rewiring the brain. Joining me is neuroscientist and also an expert in brain function and brain chemistry, and also one of the scientists from the film What the Bleep Do We Know, Dr. Joe Dispenza. Hi.
Hi, Lisa.
Great to have you here.
Happy to be with you.
We're going to make some changes today.
I hope.
We're going to break some habits, Joe.
All right, let's do it.
So, I mean, you have an enormous amount of credibility in this area because you did this yourself physically. And I know that this happened a while ago, but if you could just remind our listeners how you healed your body completely from a massive spinal cord injury.
Well, I think in order for us to wake up, we need a wake-up call. And in 1986, I got the call. I was in a triathlon in Palm Springs, California. I was in the biking portion of the race, and I was negotiating a turn, and the police officer that was helping me to make the turn had his back to the oncoming traffic. So the moment I made the turn, this four-wheel drive Bronco going 55 miles an hour just clipped me from behind, and I landed pretty squarely on the ground and ultimately wound up breaking 6 vertebrae in my spine, some bone fragments on the spinal cord, and it had created some neurological problems for me. And the conventional treatment for that is a Harrington rod surgery, where they cut the back parts of your vertebrae off and then they screw in these long stainless steel rods. And
that's not just one surgery, that's multiple, isn't it?
Well, it could be multiple, but the purpose of the Harrington rods is to pull the spine back, the spinal column off the spinal cord, and to stabilize it. And it sounded like a good idea for any patient that I see with that condition. I would recommend the surgery, but this was me, and it wasn't so quick to just rush into it. So after 4 opinions from 4 of the leading surgeons in Southern California, I really had to make a significant decision. Do I weigh my old beliefs against a new paradigm and jump off into the unknown and try something new? If there's an intelligence that's giving us life, could I make contact with it? Could I give it a specific plan, instructions, a template, and then surrender it to a greater mind and allow it to do the healing for me? Or do I stick with a conventional model and take the safe route and possibly have a handicap and live on addictive medications the rest of my life? So I decided to go from a philosophical realm and to initiate that to try to create a new experience.
There's so much science behind how the medications and the surgery works, and that has all been documented and verified and so forth. So it would make sense, and most of us make decisions based on that. Oh, this has been proven, it's been done before, people have survived, they have this kind of quality of life. The other isn't so proven.
Yeah, I mean, I was accused of having post-traumatic stress disorder and that I hit my head, and this was not a logical decision for a young
Wow.
guy. But I mean, really, upon reflection, it's really just two models. There's a mechanistic model of reality where when things break, you fix them. But then there's also a vitalistic model of reality that transcends materialism. And that vitalistic model says that there's energy, there's information, there's an intelligence that's organizing trillions of functions per second in every cell of your body. And if that intelligence is a consciousness and an awareness, then maybe you can become present with it enough to begin to give it some instructions. And so I thought, hell, I might as well take a chance. I can't heal my back, but a greater mind can do it for me. So I thought, if my will matches its will, if my mind matches its mind, and if my love for life matches its love for life, it should answer the call. So I wanted to develop a relationship with it and give it really specific instructions. And if I lost my focus, or if I lost my attention, I would stop and start all over again. And that's really when I started to learn about the mind and the brain, because I realized how unfocused I was, number one. And number two, when we're in crisis or trauma, we wind up focusing on what we don't want instead of what we do want. So turning that battleship around was my dark night of the soul. And
Huge. Yes.
I think after about 6 weeks, though, I started noticing some very significant changes. That was the moment when I started noticing those changes, that what I was doing was making a difference. And then I started doing it with more passion.
What was your specific practice? What did you do in those moments, the small moments?
Well, I mean, I thought this idea that the power that made the body heals the body. I mean, I believe that to this day, and I believe that the quantum model of reality explains healing better than anything. I mean, you can't explain how even a cut heals without bringing the quantum model. I mean, you can talk about molecules and circuits and chemicals and attractions and
Cells
repulsions.
and so forth, yeah.
Well, that's really not how it works. I mean, that's a model that's very limited. So I said, if the power that made the body heals the body, and this consciousness is an awareness, and awareness is paying attention, then I have to be completely present with it. Just like when you're with your daughter and she's with you, she knows when you're present with her and when you're not, and you know when she's present with you and when you're not.
Right.
And this intelligence requires our presence, which means your mind can't wander to the future, to the past, and to extraneous information. You have to be completely present. And I wanted to create a very specific instruction. I wanted to reconstruct every single one of my vertebrae, step by step, from start to stop, and repair every single one of those areas that I knew from the scans. And if I lost my focus, because I wasn't present, I was thinking about living in a wheelchair, if I should sell my home or my practice,
Right.
then I lost my focus. I wasn't creating a clear signal. I would stop, and I would start all over again. Now here's the problem. I would start getting frustrated that I lost my focus, and then when I got emotional, I got frustrated, then I got more unfocused. And so after a couple weeks, I started figuring out that instead of reacting, just to keep bringing it back, and I was increasing my attention span during that time. And then once I was able to complete a very clear picture, it would take me 2 or 3, sometimes longer, just 3 hours immersed in the inner world. But I was wiring new circuits over time every single day, and it started getting easier because as nerve cells wire together, you start constructing physical changes in the brain. Those changes then you can reactivate the next day, and they should be easier to select. So it started getting easier for me, and I started to be able to do it in shorter and shorter amount of time. And when I really got through it the first time from start to finish without losing my focus, it was like I hit a tennis ball in the sweet spot. Something clicked, and when I knew that, I knew that something happened, and that's when I started feeling all the changes in my body, my pain, all the sensations changing, and that's when I knew that if I was making those changes outside of me, I should pay attention to what I was doing inside of me and do it with more conviction, with more intensity.
So we're going to see a video here of cells wiring and firing together, but I want to ask you about the quantum model of this. So when we see these neurons that are literally creating these bridges, where is the quantum field within the neurons?
Well, the quantum field is the space between the atoms inside the neurons, and at the same time the field energetically around them. So learning is making new synaptic connections. Every time you learn something new, there is a physical change that takes place in your brain. The brain upscales its hardware. So if you learn something in this show, or you learn something in reading a book, and you learn something on a documentary, you have a footprint of consciousness left in your brain. So consciousness then has to leave material evidence of what we've learned biologically. And so if learning is making new synaptic connections, then remembering is maintaining and sustaining them. So how do two neurons know how to reach across a bridge and connect?
Right.
Because not only is there genetic changes taking place where those genes are creating proteins in a moment-by-moment state where a branch can grow that quickly and connect. When you see these pictures, that's a gene being switched on to do that, and the gene switches on and then there's a physical change. But how do those two neurons know how to bridge and connect? That's the field of information in consciousness that they're sharing. And it's that consciousness and the energy that's supporting it that allows that information to connect. So then you think you're this, we think we're our physical body,
Right,
but we're
right.
actually, we're the field around the body using this body as a puppet. So when you begin to become aware that you are a consciousness, then when consciousness begins to learn from something in its environment, the biology has to change. So, but it's that field around you, consciousness, that's constructing that change biologically. So consciousness then causes the circuits to connect.
All right, well, I want to take a look at this video and you can see what we're talking about with these cells that are firing together and wiring together. Take a look. Okay, so what we just saw together were these neurons firing. So the quantum field exists outside and inside that at the same time. This is really the how-to on how to heal your body.
Well, it is a step because knowledge is the precursor to experience. The more knowledge you have, the more prepared you are for an experience. So you have three brains that allow you to go from thinking to doing to being. When you learn information, you store it in your analytical, philosophical, theoretical thinking neocortex. That's
Okay.
the home of the you and the me. That's that walnut on the outside. And so if you're learning how to heal yourself, or you're learning about quantum physics, and you're learning about neuroscience, or you're learning about love, or forgiveness and letting go, as you're reading the book, your brain is physically changing, right? And if you review it and you think about it, the contemplation process begins to seal the connections. So then your learning is the first step. Now, when you take that philosophical information and you initiate it, you apply it, you personalize it, you demonstrate it.
You practice
Now
it.
you have to modify your behaviors in some way and do something differently. Well, if you change your actions, and then the new experience then is created. Experience then enriches the brain neurologically. Now you begin to add more connections to the semantic information that you learned, and now there's more circuits in place that's mapping the experience through your senses.
So that's the doing.
Then there's an emotional component that's created from the limbic brain, the second brain. Then all of a sudden, if you get your behaviors to match your intentions or your actions equal to your thoughts, then you should have a new experience and you should create a new emotion and you should feel successful. You should feel like a patient parent. You should feel in love with life. You should feel like a great leader. And the moment you feel that emotion, now you're teaching your body chemically to understand what your mind is intellectually understood. So knowledge is for the mind and experience is for the body. And we could say in that moment, you're embodying knowledge. And you're literally signaling new genes in new ways, and you're beginning to change the expression, not only in the brain, but as well in the body. Now, the new experience means that you have a neurochemical change taking place where mind and body are aligned, but really the mastery of that philosophical information after you initiate it is the repetition of it, to be able to reproduce the experience at will. And if you can do it enough times, then you begin to create networks of neurons that you can activate on command, and you can bring up the emotion from the experience. And when you go how you think and how you feel working together, when you align them, that's called a state of being, and you activate the third brain called the cerebellum. That's where all those implicit automatic skills and habits exist. So then now you are compassionate, now you are a leader, now you are patient, because you have neurochemically conditioned your body to become the mind of compassion, or we could say mind and body are aligned. So it's an evolution, Lisa, of those 3 steps. And so when you learn that information, that's the connection in the brain. And the research shows that if you learn just a bit of information, you can upscale the connections in your brain from about 1,300 connections to 2,600 connections. That's just learning a few bits of information. If you don't revisit that information, those connections wither apart in a matter of hours.
Go away.
So we have to continuously review and remind.
What about the study around intensifying the emotion, around the being part of it? Does the intensity of the emotion double or triple the neurons, the connections?
That's a great question. So emotions either keep us anchored to the past, like you have an experience that brands you emotionally and you can't get past that emotion.
Right, that bad habit.
Then that emotion's driving certain thoughts, and for the most part you're thinking in the past. And if you do that enough times, you'll condition the body to literally live in the past. And the body can't then create a new future because it's so connected to the past. But then if you can take emotion, and primarily elevated emotions, emotions of love and gratitude and inspiration and invincibility and courage, those elevated emotions then we can use to drive us into a new future. So then when you learn new information and you review it, you're actually changing your brain neurologically. Now your brain is classically a record of the past, of all the things you've learned and experienced in your life. It's an artifact. But now as you learn new information and you begin to think about how you're going to apply it, you begin to create a vision, you're installing the hardware. Now your brain is now a map to the future. Now, once it's a map to a future, and you can begin to revisit that vision, and you can bring up the emotion of what that vision is going to create. Now, most people say, well, I'll give thanks when my wealth shows up, or I'll feel happy when my lover appears, or we wait for something outside of us to change something inside of us. That's the Newtonian model of physics. Quantum model is to give thanks ahead of the actual experience. So much so that your body, as the unconscious mind, doesn't know the difference between actual experience in your life that creates an emotion and an emotion that you fabricate by thought alone. The body literally believes it's in that future reality in the present moment, and you're going from thinking to being without doing anything.
Wow.
Because the body literally does not know the difference. So then you're selecting new genes in new ways, you're instructing those genes, and your body's believing it's in that future in the present moment, and you're moving into a state of being that's defined in the future. So the research shows with mental rehearsal, thinking about a future, that it changes the brain and it changes the body. But the research that was done to show that it changes the body is that when people said, like they were doing finger exercises, and one group of people were pulling a spring for an hour a day for 4 weeks, and at the end of 4 weeks they had a 30% increase in muscle strength. Well, that makes sense.
Okay.
Put a load on a muscle, you take it through a range of motion,
right.
You tear the protein fibers, they grow back bigger, that's adaptation. But another group, they had them close their eyes and mentally rehearse pulling the spring in their mind without ever pulling the spring. And when they said to these people, when you pull that spring in your mind, say harder, stronger, bring up the emotion to amplify the effort, well, it enhanced their muscle strength. And as a matter of fact, the average person had a 22% increase in muscle strength, never lifted a finger. So the body began to change to look like it was having the experience for 4 weeks, but the body never lifted a finger.
Fascinating.
So now the body now is physically changed by thought alone. Now, why is this important? Because if your brain and body look like the experience has already happened, then relax, because the experience is going to find you. because the body already is in the future.
So you can create a memory into the future that your body then remembers as if it's in the past.
In our advanced
Beautiful.
workshops, we teach people how to remember a future.
Wow, that's beautiful. We're going to take a look at this video where Dr. Joe's describing the 3 brains. Take a look.
Good afternoon. Now we have 3 brains that allow us to go from thinking to doing to being. Each brain is its own individual biocomputer with its own anatomy and own circuitry, its own physiology and chemistry. They even have their own history as well as their own sense of time and space. Now the first brain, the neocortex, it's the newest brain in evolution. It's that walnut-shaped structure that sits on the outside with all of its folds and valleys in yellow there. It's the newest, the most evolved and highly specialized in human beings. Right under the neocortex is called the limbic brain, the chemical brain, the emotional brain, or the mammalian brain. It's about the size of a lemon, and it's responsible for regulating internal chemical order. Right in the back of the brainstem there in red is called the cerebellum, the reptilian brain. It's the oldest brain in evolution. It's the seat of the subconscious mind. Now, your brain is made up of about 100 billion neurons. If you took 100 billion sheets of paper and stacked them on top of each other, it would be 5,000 miles high. That's the distance from Los Angeles to London. Now, nerve cells possess the unique ability to store and communicate information between each other. So your neocortex, your thinking brain, is the seat of your conscious awareness. You're listening to me right now with your neocortex. And what the neocortex loves to do is to gather information. And every time you learn something new, you make a new synaptic connection in your thinking brain. That's what learning is. Learning is forging new connections. And every time you learn something new, your brain physically changes. So you read a book on how to ride a bicycle, you read a book on how to build a doghouse, you read a book on how to dance the salsa, how to cook French cuisine, how to become successful, how to be a better parent. And your brain literally upscales its hardware to reflect a new level of mind. The principle in neuroscience says this: nerve cells that fire together wire together. And as you begin to learn new information, you biologically wire that information into your cerebral architecture. So if learning is making new synaptic connections, then remembering is maintaining and sustaining those connections. And just like any relationship, the more you communicate, the more bonded you become. And neurons are exactly the same way. Now, once these neurons begin to fire and wire together, they actually form networks, what neuroscientists call neural networks. Now, neural networks are just gangs of neurons that have fired and wired together to form a community of neurosynaptic connections. It could be related to an idea, a concept, a memory, experience, a skill or behavior and action. But these networks actually have an electrochemical component. And if you want to see mind in action, watch this. That's a thought right there. Again. So you generate more electrical impulses in your brain in one day than all the cell phones on the planet put together. Now, the neuroscientific definition of mind is the brain in action. Mind is the brain at work. Mind is what the brain does. And because we have 100 billion neurons seamlessly pieced together, we can make the brain fire in different sequences, different patterns, and different combinations. And whenever we make the brain work differently, we're changing our mind. So once you've understood something intellectually, theoretically, once you've understood something philosophically, if you take what you intellectually learned in your thinking brain and you apply it, you personalize it, you demonstrate it, it means you're going to have to modify your behavior in some way. And if you change your actions and you do something differently, you're going to have a new experience. Now, when you're in the midst of an experience, everything you're seeing and smelling and tasting and feeling and hearing, all of your 5 senses are gathering this vital information from the environment. And as you begin to process all this information and it's rushing back to your brain, jungles of neurons begin to organize themselves into patterns. The moment those neurons string into place, the brain releases a chemical, and that chemical is called a feeling or an emotion. So experience then enriches the circuitry in your brain neurologically, but then it produces a chemical that's released in the second brain called the limbic brain or the emotional brain. So you can remember your first kiss. You can remember graduating from college. You can remember the birth of your first child. You can remember finishing a marathon. You can remember catching a fish off the coast of Mexico and then taking it home and cooking it and drinking some really good wine that tastes good and feeling the ocean breeze on your face and seeing the sunset. And we could say that you were altered from that experience. The problem is, you can't remember what you had for dinner the night before. That's because routine lulls the brain to sleep.
All right, so you mentioned that if you have positive experiences or elation or inspiration, that those create hardwires in the brain. What if you have things like anger, where you're just so mad about somebody being treated so poorly that inspires and motivates you to do something different, where you have that kind of rage that comes up that puts you into making a difference direction? Does that hardwire and encase itself the same way a positive emotion would?
Wow, we need a bottle of wine in 2 hours to answer that question.
Good with me. Let's go.
So when we react to someone or something in our life, there's a change in our internal chemical state. We're altered in some way. And the emotions of stress are anger and aggression and hostility, their frustration, their hatred, their judgment, their fear, anxiety, insecurity, competition, hopelessness, powerlessness, depression, guilt, shame, unworthiness. Those are all created by the hormones of stress. Now, those emotions tend to produce a very strong energetic signature. Why? Because if you're being chased by a lion in antiquity, you better wake up and pay attention to your body, to your environment and time, and those hormones give us a rush of energy.
The adrenaline.
So the adrenaline that's created produces a strong branding effect, and we can remember experiences better because we can remember how they feel. Now, when we're altered in some way because of some emotional reaction from someone or something, it alters our perception too. And so when we're feeling differently because of the experience, if we react during that time that we're altered, if we say something, if we do something, if we write an email, we'll always say, I should have never said that. I should have never done that. I should have never sent that email, because our perception is altered. We're acting in survival, and when we're in survival, we tend to be highly predictable, just very limited and selfish.
So hormones make you do that.
Hormones make us do that. So then, if you can't control your emotional reaction and you allow that refractory period of chemicals from some event that's happened to you in your day or your week, and you allow it to linger for hours or days, that's called a mood. A mood is just one long emotional reaction. So you say to someone, what's wrong with you? I'm in a mood. Really? Why are you in a mood? Well, this thing happened to me 5 days ago.
Yep.
They're basically living by the same emotion. If you keep that same refractory period going on for weeks or months, that's called a temperament. Why is he so frustrated and angry? I don't know. Why? Because this experience happened to me 6 months ago, which means the person is still reacting to the same past event. Now, if you keep that refractory period going on for years on end, that's called a personality trait. So then...
Are those neurons just bundled together and...
So then the emotion from the experience then we begin to identify with as who we are. We're not our emotions, but we wear those emotions layer by layer. Now here's the problem. Those emotions then drive our thinking. And so then we only can think equal to how we feel, and when feelings become the means of thinking, or we can't think greater than how we feel, then for the most part, The emotion drives certain thoughts in the brain. Those neurons fire and wire in a very specific sequence, pattern, and combination. Those neurons then produce the chemicals for us to feel more anger. And then once we feel more anger, we're going to think more thoughts equal to how we feel. And this cycle goes on, and we begin to hardwire our brain into very fixed patterns, and we emotionally condition the body to live in the past. So now the body is believing it's in the same environmental conditions 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. The body's in the past. So a person who's motivated by justice because of an experience that created anger in them, if they regulate their emotions properly, then they're using that emotion as inspiration. They're transmuting the anger into inspiration as long as they understand its energy. Now, if they get in similar situations that create the same emotion because it's similar to the event that happened in the past, then their challenge is to not experience anger, because if they haven't overcome that anger, then they haven't evolved. Really what they're doing is they're saying, I'm standing up for the justice of this cause because I've been branded emotionally, but they haven't gotten beyond that emotion yet. It keeps them anchored to the past.
Right, but sometimes that's the emotion that, like an activist, you know, that feeds into that injustice in order to propel them in towards justice. But you're saying that it's like the activist without the anger.
Exactly.
And that's how you actually rewire the brain to create.
Exactly. So then as you begin to overcome the emotions from past experiences, the memory without the emotion is called wisdom. And that's the name of the game here, isn't it?
It is. It's evolving.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's evolving.
So then as you begin to inhibit certain thoughts, as you begin to restrain certain habits and behaviors and actions and choices, and as you begin to become aware of the emotions that keep bringing you to a lower denominator, nerve cells that no longer fire together, no longer wire together, you begin to silence the circuits in your brain that are connected to the old self. And if you don't use it, you lose it. So then there are physical changes that take place in the brain, and we call that pruning. And so as you begin to no longer use those circuits, the brain doesn't need them, so it begins to prune those connections away. Now, every place where one neuron that connects with another neuron is called a memory. So if you're pruning the circuits away that are connected to the old self, then the memory of the old self no longer exists biologically. Now, we could say you're born again, or we could say you're reinvented, and so then where is that memory stored? And it's stored in the soul as wisdom. And that's when we get to then begin to create new experiences, because the soul now is no longer anchored to the emotion that keeps reliving the past experience.
So what about you? Do you get angry? Do you get hooked? Do you get triggered?
I do. I mean, we always joke around about this. I mean, I think emotions are part of life. As a matter of fact, emotions make life fun. And when I react to something, it's not the question of that I reacted. The question is how long I react. Like a kid, you know, you see a kid go, "What? I don't want to put my shoes on." You're putting them on. Okay,
right.
They put their shoes on, and then, all right, I got my shoes on. So like adults, you know, I mean, and what's one of the greatest things that we can teach our children, emotional intelligence, is shortening the refractory period of their emotional reactions. That's it.
That's resilience.
That's resilience. So then if they can't get beyond their emotions, it's going to become part of their personality, and they're going to use those emotions to get what they want. So it's key, because as we live our life, we're always going to be dissatisfied, or we're going to have thwarted intentions or unfulfilled expectations.
Yeah.
There's a lot that's going to go on. And you can go, damn.
Right.
Right. And they just get on with it. And I mean, that's me. I always go, my assistant and I always laugh about it all the time, because I always say, don't respond yet. Let's wait for the chemicals to wear off. Let's just wait.
Great.
Just wait.
What a great
I
way to-
want. I know I want to too. I feel so good. You know? But if we get beyond it, then the gap between the way things appear and the way things really are closed down, because now we're not looking at that experience through that emotional, window. So then when the emotion wears off, you have more clarity, you have more resilience, can make better choices, because that refractory period has been altered. So I don't think it's bad to react. I mean, I came from an Italian family. It's just what we do. But how long you react is the question. So I think that's true evolution.
That's interesting, because that Italian part of you, though, is hardwired. And you have changed it. You have evolved out of
I certainly have.
Certain areas of that. All right, we're going to take a look at this video here where Dr. Joe explains what that means to break that habit of being yourself. Take a look.
Hi, my name is Dr. Joe Dispenza. I want to take a moment and introduce you to my new book. It's called Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself: How to Lose Your Mind and Create a New One. Now, there's a basic premise in the book that says your personality creates your personal reality. Now, your personality is made up of how you think, how you act, and how you feel. So the present personality who's listening to me right now has created the present personal reality called your life. It also means then if you wanted to create a new personal reality, a new life, then on a fundamental level you would have to change some thoughts that you have about yourself or your life, behaviors or habits that you continuously demonstrate, or feelings and emotional reactions that you've memorized that's become part of your identity. Now, the new science tells us that we are not doomed by our genes, that we're not hardwired to be the same for the rest of our life, that we're marvels of adaptability and change. And most people then, I think all of us, try to create a new personal reality as the same personality. But this new science tells us that we can change both our mind and our bodies because of this new science called neuroplasticity. Neuroplasticity tells us that we're changed by every thought we think, every experience we have, every new choice we make, every new experience and emotion that we can conjure up. The brain literally changes to reflect a new mind. And because of the science of epigenetics, that we can signal new genes in new ways. But if we keep doing the same things and thinking the same thoughts and responding to the same circumstances in the same way, we keep signaling the same genes that ultimately cause us to head to our genetic destiny. Change your mind, though, and you can begin to signal new genes that can change your health. And because of this theory in quantum physics that says that your subjective mind has an effect on your objective world, then maybe then when we change how we think and feel inside of us, that those thoughts and feelings become the very blueprints of our destiny. This is what the book is about. And it gives people permission to experiment, because this is the time in history where people not only want to know, but they want to know how. So after I appeared in the movie What the Bleep Do We Know, and I wrote my other book called Evolve Your Brain, The Science of Changing Your Mind, the common question was, how do we do this? So science is the contemporary language of mysticism. And because we can use science to demystify the mystical, it gives every person the opportunity to experiment in their life. So can you believe in a future that you can't see or experience with your senses yet? But you've thought about enough times in your mind that your brain is literally changed to look like that event has already happened? And can you emotionally embrace a future reality that it already exists as a potential in the quantum field? And can you emotionally embrace that reality over and over again so you begin to signal new genes in new ways so that your body is physically changed to look like the event has happened? Because when your brain and body are physically changed ahead of the actual event, then they're no longer a record of the past, but now, in fact, a map to the future. And to live by this law is to live by the quantum law, which says that the environment is an extension of our mind. And when we truly change our mind, our life changes. I hope you enjoy it.
Okay, so your latest book is You Are the Placebo, and you outline 3 scientific principles in that book. Can you explain that and why you wrote the book about the placebo?
Well, one of the things that started happening in the workshops that we've been teaching around the world is we've been seeing people right during our events that have MS or lupus or cancer or chronic pain or food allergies and all kinds of different health conditions. We've seen dramatic physical changes take place either during the event, right, during the workshop, or we're getting emails saying, hey, I just got my blood values and my condition doesn't exist any longer.
Wow, so it affects afterwards.
So you start thinking about the placebo. Why is it you can give someone a sugar pill, a saline injection, or do a sham surgery, a fake surgery, and a certain percentage of those people get well? In other words, they accept, believe, and surrender to the idea, the thought that that drug, that's not a drug, it's a sugar pill, that saline injection or that sham surgery is going to produce the effect.
What is the percentage? Sorry for interrupting. What is
the percentage, by the way, in placebos varies from 10% to 100%.
Oh,
For
okay.
example,
Okay, it's a wide range.
3 out of 4 people who are given a sugar pill and told it's an antidepressant, 3 out of those 4 people will have pretty significant changes in their depression.
That's high.
Some of those people, you can do a brain scan on them, and you can see that there's been physical changes in their brain as if they've taken the drug. In other words, when a person accepts, believes, and surrenders to the thought that they're going to get better and doesn't analyze it, it begins to activate their autonomic nervous system, and now the body makes its own pharmaceuticals to match the exact drug that they're taking. Now, most people, I don't think they get this on a deep level, because if you begin to understand that this occurs, then I ask the question, well, why give a person a sugar pill, a saline injection, or a sham surgery? Why don't we teach them how to do it by thought alone?
Right.
And so the research that we've been doing over the last year and a half or so shows that you don't need a sugar pill or a saline injection or a fake surgery. That there are 3 principles that come into the effect of the placebo. And if you can teach people these 3 principles, you should be able to produce the same change in their state of being. So the first principle is called conditioning.
Okay.
And conditioning is based on the idea that if you give someone, this is a great study. They gave a group of children an inhaler for asthma. And what they did was they blended a scent of cinnamon with the stimulation of the drug. And every time they had an asthmatic reaction, they would inhale the albuterol, and it would cause bronchial dilation, and it would help them breathe better. But what they were doing is they were inhaling also the scent of cinnamon. Unbeknownst to the children, they kept lowering the value of the drug, and the children were just spraying the cinnamon's water in their mouth, and they were conditioning their body chemically by removing the drug and anticipating the effect of the drug. And so it works with pain as well. You can give people a morphine injection, give them a morphine injection, give them a morphine injection, and then don't give them the morphine injection, and the brain makes their own morphine.
Wow.
You can give a Parkinson's patient a certain drug to help their dopamine levels. Do it again, do it again, do it again, and then give them a saline injection. And before you know it, they're making their own dopamine. Now, not just a little dopamine, 200 times the amount of dopamine. So if you are conditioning yourself to take an aspirin every day because it helps to reduce your headaches or your pain in your back, in time then, if you produce a pill that looks like an aspirin and you give it to a patient, a certain percentage of them will accept, believe, and surrender that they're taking the aspirin when they're just taking a saline injection, and their body will create their own anti-inflammatories by thought alone. Now, they can't consciously make their pain go away. They can't consciously increase their dopamine levels.
It's the routine.
It's the conditioning in which if you keep conditioning the body in anticipation, just like Pavlov's dog begins to salivate when the bell is rang, the body begins to prepare itself for the event ahead of the actual event by creating the exact chemistry in anticipation of it occurring. So then there's a great study where we talk about anticipatory nausea. Like many people, when they're going to their first chemotherapy treatment, they get nauseous on their drive to the first chemotherapy treatment because their doctor told them that they were going to get sick from chemotherapy. So on their way to the treatment, they're thinking about getting nauseous and they're accepting the idea that they could. And then in a matter of moments, their body begins to create the chemistry to match the thought, and they begin to get nauseous. So the question is, if 50% of those people can get nauseous on their drive to their first chemotherapy treatment, 50% of the people in the world can get healthy on their drive to work in anticipation of being well. We tell our staff at our clinic, if 50% of those people can get sick on their drive to their first chemotherapy treatment, 50% of our patients can get well on their drive, and because as they begin to think about what the treatment is going to do, they begin to make their own chemicals to match it. So which brings me to the second point, which is what we call expectation. So then expectation is really highly important, because when you start administering some type of placebo, what a person does is someone says, hey, this saline injection they don't say saline, they say this new drug is going to take away your Parkinson's, and the doctor's enthusiastic, and the patient begins to select the potential in the quantum field, a new reality, a new idea, a new future, and then they begin to emotionally embrace what it would feel like to be well. They begin to create an elevated emotion. So when you combine a clear intention with an elevated emotion, the way you think and the way you feel creates a new state of being. And it is those chemicals that begin to change the body by thought alone.
Do you create it in the quantum field and bring it in, or do you go to it?
Doesn't matter. It really is. The patient has no idea.
Right.
You know, you can tell a patient, hey, look, we're going to do this serious surgery on your knee. You can wheel them in there and you can slice their knee open and never do the surgery. And this has happened more than once. It's Mosley's work. And it shows then that in 2 years, 6 years later, these men are running around with no knee pain, full range of motion. Well, how the heck did that happen?
Wow.
Well, they believed, accepted, and surrendered to the idea that the surgery would work. And the thought began to imprint into the autonomic nervous system, and it was the autonomic nervous system that healed the cartilage. They couldn't consciously heal the cartilage, but they selected the idea that they were better, they emotionally embraced it, and then they surrendered it to a greater mind, and it's exactly the formula for how the second mechanism works.
You've said the word surrender several times. Now, what do you mean by that? You give up all of the ideas of it not working? What do you mean by surrender?
If I said to you, hey, I know you're stressing, but you're leaving town and I'm going to clean your house. If you know I'm going to come and clean your house, you're going to surrender like, okay.
Okay,
I'm letting go. So when you let go, it means you're not going to analyze how it's going to happen or when it's going to happen.
And you have no expectations of the outcome.
That's right. You're not trying to control the outcome. So people who surrender really well tend to be the people who just have the most trust in the future.
That's a key right there, is surrendering. It's a big part of it, because you can create the imagery and intensify the emotion. I think the surrendering has a huge part to do with it, because you let go of the control.
Yeah, and you have to get out of the way. And we've seen hundreds of brain scans, and we know that you and I are at our best when we get out of the way. So the second point is expectation.
Yes. And the third?
And we've taught people how to do that exact thing. Number one, if we're going back to the first one, we've taught them how to condition their body to a new mind. We do that in our workshops. In the second scenario, we have them select the potential in the quantum field, emotionally embrace it, begin to teach their body emotionally what it's going to feel like ahead of the event, and then we allow them to surrender to a greater mind and to live as if their prayers are already answered. And it's that exact mechanism that begins to start the healing process. But the third thing is called assigning meaning. And when you assign meaning to something, you increase your intention. Here's a great experiment. They took a group of Latin American maids that worked in a hotel, and they followed them around in one day, and they saw them flipping mattresses and moving furniture and scrubbing, the walls of the bathroom and making beds and pushing carts. And the scientists realized that these women were actually exceeding the Surgeon General's requirement for exercise. Now, they didn't know that they were doing that, so they divided them into two groups. They allowed one to continue doing what they were doing mindlessly, and they selected the other group and they said, do you know the benefits of exercise? You're actually burning more calories than you're making. Now, all these women, most of them were overweight. Exercise helps to reduce body fat. It helps to lower your heart rate. It will change your lean body mass. it'll increase your self-esteem. And they told them all the benefits of exercise. Well, in 1 month, without changing anything, those women lost weight. Their heart rate went down 10 points.
Interesting.
They had greater self-esteem. Their lean body mass ratio was better. Why? Because they put intention, or they assigned meaning to what they were doing. So the more you know, the better results you get. So when a doctor says, we have this new drug, and he's or she is enthusiastic about it, or a person begins to understand because they're participating in their therapy what they're doing and why.
Participating in their therapy.
They're taking responsibility. Then that's why we use so much scientific knowledge in our workshops, because we want people to understand what they're doing and why, so that there's nothing left to conjecture, nothing left to faith, nothing left to dogma. They know exactly what they're doing and when. So when you assign meaning to something, you increase the intention. It's when you then, the more you know, the better results you get.
That explains it. That explains a lot in terms of placebo and why. And I like the fact that you don't leave it up to chance or circumstance, that you actually scientifically validate these points around the placebo. We're going to take a look at Dr. Joe talking about his new book, You Are the Placebo. Take a look.
Hi, my name is Dr. Joe Dispenza. I'd like to take a moment and introduce you to my new book, You Are the Placebo, Making Your Mind Matter. I loved writing this book because it was an opportunity for me to help people understand that they have within their reach all the biological and neurological machinery to produce greater levels of health in their body and produce some pretty astounding changes in their life. The book is about you. It's about an opportunity for you to understand the importance of changing your health by thought alone. That's what the placebo is about. Why is it that you can give a person a sugar pill, a saline injection, or perform a fake surgery, and a certain percentage of those people actually have greater effects in healing than the people who actually got the real drug, got the real surgery? There must be some element of mind involved, and that's why I wrote the book. I take people on a journey in this book with some really interesting stories of how people were healed by thought alone, how they were believing that they were taking a real medication, and in fact they were taking a placebo, and the brain changed to a degree that it looked like they had been taking the real drug. In other words, when that person accepted, believed, and surrendered to the condition without any analysis, they began to program their subconscious mind, or their autonomic nervous system, and their body, through its own pharmacy of chemicals, produced the same response as if they had taken the drug or had the surgery or received some type of therapy. The question is, can you teach people how to utilize the placebo response, and instead of putting their belief in something that's inert and known to them, can they begin to select a new possible reality and emotionally embrace it to such a degree that they begin to condition their body into a new state of being, and their autonomic nervous system begins to make their own blend of chemicals that causes the body to literally respond to a new mind? Well, the answer is yes. Over the last 25 years, we've been teaching people around the world that they are the placebo. We have demystified some of the principles so that they understand how to apply it in certain ways so they can begin to experience the benefits. We'll show you and introduce you to people in the book in our workshop, some of them that had rare genetic disorders that science had no solution for, and they healed themselves by thought alone. We have scientific evidence in the book, brain scans, to show that those people that actually made the significant changes, that there were permanent changes that took place in their brain as well. We'll also end the book with a nice exercise or meditation so you can begin to understand how to apply the principles so that you can begin to be your own placebo. I hope you enjoy it.
So what role does meditation play in the placebo effect instead of medication?
Well, I mean, if you really want to make change and teach people how to do it, to change is to be greater than your environment, to be greater than your body, and to be greater than time. So much of our life is interacting with our external environment, going to certain places, seeing certain people, doing certain things at the exact same time. And it's our external environment that's controlling how we think and feel. And if we keep thinking and feeling a certain way, we condition the body to be the mind. And a habit is when your body is the mind. So then to change is to be greater than your body, or to be greater than the habits and addictions emotionally of your body. And then if your yesterday is going to be like your tomorrow, and your tomorrow is just like your yesterday, then people's predictable future is just like their familiar past. So teaching people how to get beyond their body, get beyond their identity connected to their environment, and to get beyond time is how we meditate. So when you begin to close your eyes and you eliminate the sensory stimulation from your external environment, and you play soft music in the background, or you put earplugs in, and you put your body away,
and you go into
and
your
you forget
inner
about
world.
time, if you do that properly, then you will become nobody, you will become no one, you'll become no thing, you'll become nowhere in no time. You will become thought alone. And only when you are pure consciousness, not connected to your body, your environment, and time, do you have dominion over your body. You can change your body. That you can create something new in your environment, and you can create some new future in a new time. So our research shows that if you're going to change your body by thought alone, then you have to become thought alone. So we now know from all the research that we've done that that's a skill. And we know how to teach people how to do that. And when they do it properly, now they can begin to instruct new genes in new ways and change their brain and body.
I listened to a meditation that you did about our body in comparison to space. And what was the intention?
Well, the research that's been done, and remember, I'm just a way to take practical information. I'm a facilitator to take practical information and disseminate it and simplify it so that you understand. When you're living by stress, right, there's something that you and I do really well. We focus on one particular outcome, and we cannot stop thinking about it over and over again.
Right.
And we become very narrow in our focus.
Yeah.
And we become very object focused. We focus on our bodies, our things in our environment, we have problems, time, and we're pretty much now a body living in the environment, living in time. And according to the quantum model, we're focusing on the particle instead of the wave. We're focusing on matter instead of possibility and energy. Well, when you do that, your brain gets very disintegrated, gets very disorganized, it gets incoherent. Different compartments of the brain are not talking to each other. That's why you feel so confused. Long-term stress creates a lot of incoherence in the brain, and when your brain's incoherent, you're incoherent. When your brain's not working right, you're not working right. So when you begin to close your eyes and open your focus, the research shows when you focus on the space, when you focus on the wave instead of the particle, when you focus on energy instead of matter, when you focus on nothing instead of something, and you begin to broaden and open your focus, the moment you begin to sense the space around you, your brain gets highly organized. It gets highly coherent. Different compartments of the brain that weren't talking to each other begin to reach out and hold hands. You start to see this whole brain state taking place, and you see the front brain talking to the back of the brain, the left talking to the right, and all of a sudden a person starts to feel more like themselves than they felt in a long time. Now that coherent signature that's created from the brain sends a very coherent message down the spinal cord, and the immune system gets a coherent message. The cardiovascular system gets a coherent message. Digestive system gets a coherent message. Things are working in rhythm. So we call that our induction, because when you teach people how to do this and they're sensing space, they're not analyzing and they're not thinking, which means their brainwave patterns naturally change from beta to alpha and some into theta. Not only just change into those states, but coherent brainwave patterns. And that's when we start to see the most significant changes that we have measured.
Can you help me with something?
I
I think you can. Just to make it practical, I want to use a personal example of something that I'm experiencing and how to maybe help me get out of it. So I miss a lot of opportunities with my daughter. She has, firsts, or she has experiences that I can't be at because I can't be there all the time because I'm a working mom, and that's my choice. To do what I do. Sometimes it doesn't work out so well because I miss really cool key events, and it hurts.
I understand.
We went to the Olympics in 2012 in London, and she's a soccer player, and I had to leave And my husband and I left my husband and my daughter there because they really wanted to go to the U.S. versus Japan soccer game. Really wanted to see Hope Solo. And it wound up that they won the game, and that moment was it like burned in her memory that has then propelled her on to become a rock star goalie. And she had, and I wasn't there. And I have this enormous amount of guilt for that.
Yeah.
And I don't want to register that into her because it registers into me all the time. So how do I get over that moment of not being there during the moment that propels her every time in a game to do so well?
Well, first of all, guilt doesn't serve you or serve her well.
It doesn't.
And that's a program. I mean, I have 3 children, and I missed certain special days because I was on the road.
Yeah.
But I'm just a creative dude, so I'm like, okay, let's film this, and we're going to watch this together, and we're going to celebrate it in the same way that you celebrate it, or watch the game together. So the guilt is feeling bad because you think on some level that you're not a good parent.
Yeah.
See, if you know you're a good parent, then you can't have guilt because you're clear that what you're doing is making a difference in the world, and you're clear that you're providing a certain amount of revenue for your family and an income. So you're looking at it through the lens of guilt. So I don't have guilt around it any longer because I don't want to feel that way. What I have is like, okay, I have to get creative now, and if I'm missing an event, then let's videotape it and let's plan on getting together and watching it and celebrating it together.
That's a good idea.
Let's get the copy of the soccer game and let's relive it together and let's make it a fun thing.
She actually came up with a great solution. She says, Mommy, you're going to be with me there in spirit.
Yeah.
And she fed that back to me.
Or, you know what, the best thing is have her recount the whole thing and celebrate it with her while she's telling the story. Oh my God, that's incredible. I mean, the fact that you're guilty or feel guilty means then you're not participating in the event authentically. If there's no guilt, I mean, look, I got an Italian mother. My mother can't make me guilty any longer. I just don't feel guilt around her. I don't have it, you know, and I love her. And so
how did you get rid of guilt?
Well, sitting in meditation for many hours and becoming aware of what guilt feels like and realizing that's not healthy to me.
No.
And that's not the kind of relationship I want with my mother. So now I see my mother, I kiss her all over the face, I hug her, I play with her. There's no time for guilt with me with her. And that's the relationship I want to have. So you bring your best to your daughter. What's your best? Your best is a genuine sense of celebration of life. That's what you bring to your daughter, and enthusiasm. And if you say, gosh, I'm going to miss this, I really want to be there, but let's think together how we can do it, relive it again. And so if you decide that that feeling isn't going away and it means more to you than what you're doing, then you have to make a choice to leave this and be present at those events because it has more value to you. But if your value is clear that you're making a difference and this is your life, then you just have to get creative, and a guilty person will never see creative options.
Right.
All they're doing is waiting for the feeling of, oh my God, I blew it again, I'm bad. You just got to get creative.
Right.
So their emotions are the end product of experience. The emotion of guilt is connected in some level to your past. And you, on some level, feel bad because you did something wrong, and now you feel like you've done something wrong until you get the clear that there's nothing wrong with what you're doing and that you are actually making a huge difference in so many people's lives and contributing in some way. And your daughter's one day going to watch these videos when you're long gone and love you, and your grandkids are going to watch these videos, and they're going to say, wow, that woman was amazing.
You're right. Guilt does rob time. It does. It takes away from time from us and here and together. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, thank you so much. Once again, I can now take that knowledge and move that into experience and then move it into a pattern.
Right. And just create something new.
Yep. That's exactly what I'll do. I'll take the thinking to the doing to the being and create a new experience.
And plus, your daughter has mirror neurons, and you don't want her to watch you in guilt because then she will imprint that, and you'll pass on that on to her daughter and to her daughter. You have to be the ideal.
That's a bigger picture.
So then now that's the greatest thing you can do for your
Yeah,
daughter, greater
that's
than
true.
showing up at those events.
It could affect future generations.
Free yourself and free her.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. If you would like to watch a replay of my interview with Dr. Joe Dispenza, you could go to GaiaMTV.com. And until next time, I invite you to stay inspired.
Follow your curiosity to Gaia.com and unlock the entire library with a special startup offer. Click the link in the description to get started for only 99 cents.